My own flesh and blood kicked me to the curb. After pouring my entire life into raising him, providing for him, giving him food, shelter, education, everything a father could give. One day, he looked me dead in the eye and told me I was getting in the way and needed to leave, handed me to grocery bags and showed me the door. Little did he know that hidden deep inside an old wardrobe, I had stashed away over $3 million. I'd been saving this money for years without telling a soul, not even my late wife Betty. I worked my fingers to the bone, took on-site jobs, pinched every penny with one single purpose, to leave something meaningful for my children. But in the end, they stopped seeing me as their father. They erased me from their lives like I was some expired product past its sell-by date. Here's the thing though, life has a funny way of coming full circle, and I learned there are things worth more than hidden money: respect, forgiveness, and dignity. So here's what I need you to do. Listen to this story all the way through. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Then tell me which part really hit you in the heart. And let me know, where are you listening from? What city? What state? You know, there comes a time in everyone's life when all that's left is silence. And let me tell you something. Silence can scream louder than any words ever could. My name is Chester. I'm 76 years old. Well-lived but misunderstood. Been a construction worker my whole life, old school style. The kind who could eyeball a level and trusted the spirit of the wall more than any engineer's measuring stick. Learned the trade from my father, who learned it from his father before him. We're a family of calloused hands and honest work. Started out hauling cement bags when I was just 13 years old. Going from job site to job site. Putting up buildings, constructing homes, helping people who never knew my name but lived in what I built. I'd wake up before sunrise, grab black coffee and buttered toast, then head out. Sun beating down on my neck, dust in my eyes, blisters on my feet. But you know what? I never complained. Work was never a burden when you believe you're building something real. It was on one of those days, middle of a construction site in Springfield, that I met Betty. She showed up with a church group, bringing juice and sandwiches to the kids hanging around the site. Tiny little thing with her hair pulled back in, a messy bun and a smile that could knock you flat. There I was with cement on my forehead and embarrassment written all over my face, trying to look important with my trowel in hand. We got married 2 years later. She was a nurse, worked at a community health clinic, took care of people like it was her calling. Our place was simple, 2 rooms, a wood-burning stove out back, and a hammock strung between the porch posts. But that's where life really lived. Michael came first. Complicated delivery. Emergency C-section in the middle of the night. When they put that boy in my arms, I shook like a leaf. Then came Sarah. Easier birth, but with a cry that announced strength right from the start. Raising 2 kids on a construction worker's salary and a nurse's paycheck wasn't easy. But we never let them go without the important stuff. Hugs, hot meals, and good examples. Betty was the heart of our home, singing while she cooked, sewing her own clothes, writing little notes and sticking them on the refrigerator door. Stay light even when everything feels heavy. She had a way with words that would echo in your head for days. I'd spend my days on job sites, but made sure to be home every night. Helped with homework, told made-up stories. Played pretend with Sarah. Gave advice to Michael, or at least I thought I was giving good advice. As time went on, Michael started changing, got quieter, more withdrawn. Always had his nose in a book, reading in corners by himself. I figured it was just him being studious, but maybe it was more than that. Sarah, though. Sarah was my little partner. She'd follow me around the yard, wanted to learn how to make cement, helped me put up chicken wire. Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. That was worth more than any college degree. Years rolled by and Michael got accepted to University of Chicago for law school. Made me proud as punch. I organized a collection at the job site, sold my motorcycle, and drove with him to register for classes. I remember the look in his eyes that day. Wasn't joy exactly, more like anxiety mixed with urgency. Like he just wanted to get out of there fast. Never said thank you, but that was okay. I understood people show love in different ways. Betty was so proud, said he was going to change the world. I believed it too. Even though he'd already started pulling away from us, Sarah got married young, had 2 kids. Lived about 10 blocks from our house. She'd visit every Sunday, bringing cheese bread and fresh coffee, sitting on the porch with me, sometimes just to be quiet together. Then the storm hit. Betty started getting tired easily. First her skin turned yellow. Then the tests came back. With the worst news, leukemia. 2 years of hospitals, appointments, chemotherapy, prayers and hidden tears. I did everything. Gave her baths, cooked meals, cleaned house, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was drowning. Michael came to visit her exactly once, stayed less than 20 minutes, said his schedule was packed. Betty smiled, thanked him, and after he left, cried quietly on my shoulder. She passed away on a cold morning, holding my hand and whispering, "Take care of them, okay?" I took care of them the best way I knew how, but that emptiness, nobody can take care of that for you. After Betty died, my routine became pure survival. Wake up, eat, stare at the front gate, hope for a phone call, and save money. Yes, save money. Even with my small social security check, I still picked up odd jobs, building retaining walls, painting fences, small repairs here and there. An American client I'd helped in Phoenix liked my work so much, he started paying me in cash, said it was his way of thanking me for my honesty. I kept every dollar in a false bottom inside Betty's old wardrobe, right there with her memories. It was like a secret between the two of us, minus $3 million, counted, sorted, and hidden. But it wasn't about greed. It was about love. I imagined my kids finding it someday and saying, he was thinking about us, even after everything. Only thing is, each came calling with a bill. My knees gave out. My eyesight got cloudy. My memory started playing tricks on me. Sarah tried to help, but with 3 young kids and a sick husband, she already had more on her plate than she could handle. That's when the phone rang. It was Michael. And his voice sounded different, lighter, almost gentle. "Dad," I was talking with Laura and we were thinking, "Why don't you come stay with us for a while? The house is big, and Tyler would love to get to know his grandfather better." I was speechless. After years of feeling forgotten, I was being remembered. I packed like I was going on vacation. My best shirts, my medications, and that thick coat Betty gave me before she died. I locked up the house carefully, and before leaving, I touched the wardrobe, the false bottom, and whispered, "Easy now. Your time will come." I went to Michael's house with my chest full of hope. When I arrived, I saw a beautiful house that looked like something from a magazine, everything automated, mirrored, and perfumed. His wife Laura greeted me with a polite but cold smile. My grandson Tyler looked me up and down, curious but wary. I thought, it's okay. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow will be better. But sometimes What looks like a fresh start is just the front door to a new kind of loneliness. And that's why I tell you, not every hug we expect actually comes, but every silence we listen to teaches us something. Now tell me, do you think all this is right? And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. What corner of America is this conversation reaching? Getting back to the story. I arrived at Michael's house with my heart racing, but my soul hopeful. It was like being in my 20s again. Starting a new job without really knowing what to expect. My suitcase was light, my body not so much. I brought some decent clothes, a pair of comfortable boots, and that thick coat Betty gave me before she died. The only thing that still made me feel hot. His house was something from another world, modern, full of shine, mirrors on the walls, plants growing in pots with no soil. Those artificial ones that never die but also never smell like anything. The furniture looked like movie set pieces, everything automatic and digital. And there I was in the middle of it all with my country feet and my heart heavy with memories. Laura received me politely, greeted me with a restrained smile and showed me the room where I'd be staying. It was in the back, far from the kitchen, with a small window and a lamp that turned on with a touch. Clean room, organized, but empty. No pictures, no decent curtains. The bed was low with white sheets stretched tight like they'd never been used. I walked in, put my suitcase in the corner and stood there for a few minutes just looking round. I felt like this wasn't my place, not because of the comfort, but because of the absence of touch. Affection, the smell of home. Michael came back from work in the late afternoon, rushed in talking on his phone with his tie hanging loose round his neck. He gave me a distracted pat on the back. Dad, great that you made it. This house is yours, you here. He said this while already heading up the stairs, didn't sit with me, didn't ask about the trip, didn't ask how I was feeling. I found myself there alone in the middle of that enormous living room with the sound of the digital clock blinking in the bar. Crowned. In the first few days, I tried to help. I'd wake up early, sweep the garage, organize the tools that were scattered in a corner. In the kitchen, I'd ask if I could chop vegetables or fry an egg. Laura would say, "No need, Chester. We have our routine round here." The way she spoke was always gentle but cold. Like every word was measured to not extend beyond necessary. I tried to get used to it. I'd sit on the porch, mess with the plants that were dying, chat with the mailman, read old newspapers I found in the bedroom drawer. Tyler, my grandson, was about 10 years old. Handsome, smart, but distant. I tried to get closer one day. I sat next to him on the couch and started telling him a story from my construction days, about when scaffolding collapsed and I had to jump in a creek to save a coworker. He glanced sideways, made a MHMM sound, and went back to his tablet. Game. That cut right through me. It wasn't his fault. It was my absence. I didn't exist in his life. And now I was trying to end like some overdue memory. Meals were a silent ritual. Laura cooked well, but didn't wait from me. When I'd get to the kitchen, the table was almost empty. Once I heard her whisper, "Oh, he hasn't eaten yet," and continue serving my plate without looking up. I learned to eat in silence, with my fork closer as not to disturb the atmosphere. One day, while chewing slowly, I noticed that Michael spent more time in his office than with me, and when he was present, he looked at his phone more than he looked in my eyes. One morning, Michael called me to talk. He was sitting on the edge of the couch with his hands clasped, voice low. "Dad, we wanted to ask you not to walk around the house too much in the morning. Laura works from home. Tyler has classes. The noise sometimes bothers them. I took a deep breath, nodded my head. Of course, son. Don't worry. I went back to my room and stayed there the rest of the day, like I'd been returned to a box. I started getting sick. First dizziness, then a fall in the bathroom. I hit my shoulder, hurt for days. We went to the hospital. Michael dropped me off at reception. "What's your insurance plan?" So, asked the lady at the desk. I didn't know how to answer. I tried calling Michael. He didn't pick up on the way back. He told me that couldn't happen again, that I needed to give notice before getting sick. I smiled sideways. Got it, son. Next time I'll schedule the dizziness. I went back to my room, sat on the bed, and looked out the window. The sky was cloudy and light rain was hitting the glass. I thought about Betty, thought about our simple kitchen. The yellow light from the old bulb, the smell of beans on the wood stove. I remembered how she'd rest her head on my shoulder and say, "Even with little, we have everything," and there, with everything round me, I realized how alone I was. The bedroom TV barely worked, kept making static. I asked Michael for help. He said he'd look at it over the weekend. Never did. I started leaving the TV on even without sound, just to pretend I had company. Sometimes I'd talk to myself, repeat Bible verses I'd memorized in my youth, read the Bible page by page. One day I read something that hit me like a hammer. "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." And I wondered, will they ever realize who I am? Was I ever that angel to someone? I started dreaming about my old house, about Betty's wardrobe, about the envelope hidden behind the falsehood. $3 million saved from more than 20 years. Nobody knew. Not Michael. Not Sarah. I didn't want them to know, because if they ever found out and treated me differently, I'd know it was never really about me. I wanted to tell them many times, but always held back, because if they changed their look, their tone of voice, their touch, I'd know their love didn't exist, just expectation. One night, I came out of my room to get water and accidentally overheard a conversation in the living room. Laura was saying, "He's a good man, but he's disrupting the routine. Tyler isn't sleeping right, and if something happens," Michael responded, "let's wait a few more weeks. If it doesn't get better, we'll have to find a solution." I went back to my room without making noise, lay down with my head full and my heart empty, for the first time in years. I wished I could just disappear, and that's when I realized it wasn't just about staying or not staying in the house. It was about no longer fitting in the life of someone you held trays. The days in that house got quieter and quieter. But it wasn't the good silence of when Betty would nap in the hammock after lunch and I'd listen to the birds in the yard. This was a hard, icy silence, a silence that didn't leave room for even thoughts to rest. I'd wake up every day hoping something would change. That Michael would come downstairs, sit with me on the couch, ask about the past, or simply say, "Dad, I'm happy you're here." But no, each day was like the other. Conversations were short, looks even shorter. I tried to start conversations, but he always seemed in a hurry. An email to answer, a call, an important meeting. Never had time, and when he did, seemed not to know what to do with it. There was one morning when I decided to sweep the front entrance. The yard was full of dead leaves, and I thought I could do something useful. I grabbed the broom from behind the door and started sweeping corner to corner, trying not to make noise. But Laura appeared on the porch and looked at me with that look that mixes shock and irritation. "Chester, you can leave that. the gardener comes tomorrow, you'll end up hurting yourself." I smiled politely and said everything was fine. I put the broom away and went back to my room. That room seemed to get smaller every day. It was like the walls were slowly closing in, suffocating my soul bit by bit. I spent most of my time there reading, writing in an old notebook, remembering. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and relive the smell of Betty's kitchen, the sound of the radio playing country music, the heat from the pressure cooker making that familiar whistle. There in that modern loneliness, even the whistle of a pot was missed. One day I heard Michael's voice coming from the office. "We need to solve this, Laura. It's not working. He's getting isolated and I don't know how to handle it." She responded in a drier tone. "You're the one who brought him. I warned you. The routine changed." Tyler's complaining. "We need to think about our house. What hurt most wasn't what was said. It was the way it was said. Like I was a piece of furniture in the wrong place. A piece that doesn't fit in the living room anymore." The next day Michael called me to talk. This time he turned off his phone, sat in front of me, crossed his arms, and said with a voice that was choked but firm, "Dad, I wanted to thank you for coming, for trusting me. But we realized it's hard to maintain the routine with you here. The house got cramped, the logistics are complicated, and I think maybe the best thing would be for you to go back to your house, at least for a while, to reorganize everything. Sarah can help you." Right. I stayed silent for a while, looked. In his eyes, I didn't see malice, but I also didn't see affection. I saw exhaustion, discomfort. I saw someone who'd rather not be there saying that. I took a deep breath. "Of course, son, if it's better for you all, that's fine." I tried to smile. But inside I was crumbling. It wasn't anger. It wasn't old. Deep sadness. Like my soul was returning to a dark place at no well. I started packing my things that same afternoon. The suitcase that I'd arrived with carrying hope was now filled with clothes folded with sadness. Laura helped me put some pieces in plastic bags. "Take this coat too, Chester. It's going to get cold." I thanked her even though I didn't want to. Michael called a rideshare. Said he'd already talked to Sarah, that she'd be waiting for me. The goodbye was dry. Tyler didn't even come out of his room. Laura said, "Have a safe trip." Like someone saying goodbye to a guest who stayed too long. And Michael hugged me. But it was one of those one-arm hugs, pat on the back. Like he wanted it to be over quickly. I got in the car and just told the driver, "Maple Street, number 18, house with peeling paint, gate that squeaks." The drive to my house seemed longer than ever. The streets passed quickly by the window, but inside me everything moved slowly. Like time had stopped on that couch where he told me it was time for me to go. When the car stopped, I got out with a bag in one hand and my suitcase in the other. I looked at the rusty gate, the weeds growing on the sidewalk, the old flyer stuck to the fence. It was my house, but it felt like I'd never been so far from home. I pushed the gate hard. It squeaked like always. I went in, turned on the light. One of the bulbs was burned out, the other one flickering. The smell of mold had taken over. Humidity had climbed the walls. The plants were dead. But at least there nobody was going to kick me out. I went to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and took a deep breath. I looked round, touched the arm of Betty's old armchair, opened the drawer where she kept letters, and then I leaned against the wood of the wardrobe. In the false bottom, the envelope was still there, intact, heavy. $3 million. I picked it up, sat on the bed, and just stared at it. It was like I was holding my entire story there, every brick laid, every dawn worked, Every blister I got, every tear I swallowed, I thought about everything I could have done with that money. Thought about donating it, traveling, investing. But none of that mattered. What I wanted, what I always wanted, was something no money can buy. Presence, recognition, respect, love. I sat there for a long time, the light flickering above my head, the envelope in my lap, the house in silence. But it was my silence, and honest silence is silence from someone who doesn't need to pretend. Right there, alone, I was more human than I'd been in the last months in that house so big. Later, Sarah arrived and gave me a tight hug. One of those real ones. She brought fresh dinner rolls, orange juice, and a clean blanket. Dad, you didn't deserve to go through that. I'm so sorry. And I just said, it's all right. Honey, I'm home. That night I slept poorly, but I slept with dignity. The kind of sleep that comes after taking a lot of hits. I woke up before dawn, went to the kitchen, warmed some milk on the old stove, and sat in Betty's wooden chair. There in the darkness, I understood. Sometimes you need to be rejected to understand where your truth still lives, and mine was never in luxury. It was in love. I woke up the next day with the smell of mold stuck in my nose. The old mattress had sunk in the middle and my spine felt bent in 3 places. Light came through the crack in the poorly sealed window, hitting me right in the face. I opened my eyes slowly, took time to understand where I was, took time to accept it. But this was my place again. I got up carefully. My knees hurt, my shoulders were stiff. I dragged myself to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and the water came out brown for the first few seconds. I let it run, washed my face, and looked in the foggy mirror. The old man staring back at me was me, but with a more tired look, a man who came home without having left himself. I leaned against the sink and took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, nobody was going to knock on the door asking for a quiet. Nobody was going to call me a burden. This was freedom, but it was also pain. Sarah arrived round 9 with warm dinner rolls, a gallon of milk, fresh coffee, and some containers with food from the night before. She walked in like someone who already knows the house in the dark, said she was going to do some light cleaning, and promised to come back on the weekend with the kids. I smiled. That was already more than most people had given me in recent months. We sat on the porch. She looked at me with eyes of someone carrying the world on her shoulders. Dad, do you really want to stay here alone? I said yes, and it was true, because I needed to feel the ground again. My ground, even if it was cracked, hard, and covered with fallen leaves. The days passed slowly. Like the clock was too lazy to move, I went back to hanging clothes on the line, sweeping the sidewalk, heating lunch on the old stove. I rediscovered the sounds of the house, the crack of the refrigerator, the squeak of the cabinet door, the sound of the kettle whizzing when it boiled, everything I'd missed without knowing it. The nights were longer. I'd sit in Betty's rocking chair and listen to the street, a dog barking in the distance, a car passing slowly, wind hitting the dry leaves of the oak tree. There in that silence, she came back to me. Betty. Sometimes I could almost smell her soap. Other times it was just the longing squeezing my chest. I started rereading old letters, the ones she wrote on silly dates like regular Wednesday. Or today you came home more tired than usual. She had the gift of turning simple things into beautiful things. There was one that said, if someday I'm not here anymore, don't let the world harden your heart. But the world had hardened it, and it wasn't the world's fault. It was mine. I let the house. It needed care. I did what I could, changed the living room bulb, mended the kitchen curtain, and clogged the backyard drain, everything slowly, each. Jester was a conversation with myself. One day I went to the corner store. Mrs. Henderson was still there, with whiter hair and deep eyes. Chester, I thought you'd moved away for good. I laughed. I thought so too, Mrs. Henderson. But looks like it was just a visit. She gave me 2 extra tomatoes to boost the vitamins. Sometimes I thought about Michael, but it was a thought, without anger. It was a kind of mourning. I understood. Not everyone is born to take care of others. Some people only know how to move forward, and moving forward often requires leaving behind what demands presence. I didn't tell Sarah anything about what happened. Just said it had been better this way. She didn't insist. Sarah has a giant heart, but also has wisdom. She knows some pains you only share when you can put a name to them, and this pain was still a mixture of abandonment and shame. Shame for having believed too much. I went back to looking at Betty's wardrobe with different eyes. That aged would held more than memories. It held a story. It held the secret. The $3 million were still there in the false bottom, behind the letters, wrapped in a white linen cloth. One day I thought about taking it out, telling someone. But every time I thought about it, my throat would dry up, because if the world knew I had that money, they'd look at me differently, and I wanted to be seen for who I was, not for how much I was worth. I started writing in a notebook. Simple things, loose thoughts. Phrases that came from nowhere. There's no house where love fits if affection doesn't have space. There are things you keep in your pocket and things you can only carry in your heart. Writing calmed me down. It was like talking to someone who really listens. One Sunday, Sarah brought the grandkids. They ran through the house, messed with the tools, made a mess, and I let them. We laughed. I fried fritters the way Betty used to. Sarah cried when she smelled them. It's like she's here. And I said, she is. That night when they left, I sat in the rocking chair again, looked at the starry sky, thought that life sometimes pushes us to places we didn't want to go back to. But maybe it's in those places that we find ourselves again. There, between the cracks in the wall and the hoarse hum of the old fan, I felt for the first time in a long time that there was still something good to live for. That maybe, even having been forgotten, there was still enough left inside me to start over. It had been 3 weeks since I'd come back home, 3 weeks when I'd wake up, look at the living room ceiling with its water stains, and say to myself, one more day. Chester's going to make it. It was going with little strength, but it was still going. The routine was simple. Coffee filtered through cloth, day-old bread warmed in the skillet, old radio tuned to the morning news. Betty's rocking chair had become my throne, the front, gave my world. Now and then I'd see people from the neighborhood passing by, people who grew up here, new people who didn't even say good morning. Life moved on and I was there, half forgotten, half planted. On one of those days, while sweeping the backyard, I found a folded note inside an old pot that was behind the oak tree. It was from Betty, written by hand with a blue pen on paper, yellowed by time. If you're reading this, it's because you looked for memories in the right place. That was the only sentence, nothing more, but it cut through me like a strong wind on a stuffy day. I sat on the dirt floor with the broom beside me and cried. It wasn't tears of sadness, just tears of reunion. Like she was saying, go on, Chester. There's still stuff to live for. After that day, something in me changed. It wasn't quick or miraculous, but it was real. I started getting up with more will. I went downtown on foot, almost an hour's walk. My legs hurt. The sun beat down hard, but I went. I bought white paint, brushes, rollers, and sandpaper. I came back with bags in my arms and my head full of ideas. I started painting the living room wall. The first day I only managed half. The second day I finished. Then the kitchen. Then the door frames with each brushstroke. It seemed like I was cleaning a corner of my soul too. Sarah came and asked, "Dad, why now? Why now?" And I answered, "Because I got tired of living in a house that looked abandoned. I'm not abandoned, and neither was Betty. This house is going to remember that." One Saturday afternoon, a boy knocked on the gate. He must have been about 8 years old. Buzz cut, oversized t-shirt, and smart eyes. "Are you the man with the wooden chair?" I laughed. "Depends who wants to know." He answered, "I pass by here every day and see you sitting. My name's Tommy. Want help with the painting?" I was surprised. Tommy started coming almost every day. He helped me sand walls, hold the ladder, stretch tops in return. I gave him juice and bread with butter and told stories. Lots of stories. He listened to everything quietly, eyes shining. One day I asked why he was always alone. He said his mom worked all day and his dad had left. "My grandpa died, and you remind me of him, except with more patience." That broke me down. Tommy became part of the routine. He helped me paint the front wall. We planted some seedlings on the sidewalk. The house started gaining color, and my chest started getting air. At night, I wrote more in the old notebook, jotting down thoughts that seemed like whispers from Betty. Even if everything collapses, there's still a way to build it back up, brick by brick. Real kindness is the kind that doesn't need an audience. Writing became prayer. Sarah started coming more frequently, began noticing the change. "Dad, you're different," I said. "Not different, honey. I just came back." She understood. She brought books from the library, taught me to use an old cell phone left over from her house. I started sending voice messages to her, to the grandkids. Their voices, even recorded, were like visits inside my heart. One afternoon, while messing with the toolbox, I found a broken picture frame. It was a photo of me and Michael from when he was about 12 years old. Both of us lying in the hammock, really smiling. I ran my finger over the image, thought about writing to him, saying everything was fine. But I gave up. Sometimes silence is answer enough. Maybe one day he'd come back, maybe not. But I wasn't going to wait. I went back to the wardrobe, to the false bottom, to the secret. I picked up the envelope in my hands. It was heavy. Heavy with the content and the story behind it. I sat on the bed, stared at it for a moment. I considered tearing it all up. Not out of anger, but out of freedom. But I couldn't. That money had value, yes, but not for what it could buy. It was the accumulated effort of a lifetime. It was sweat converted to paper. I still didn't know what I'd do with it. But I knew what I wouldn't do. Use it to buy affection. The following week, Tommy showed up with a book under his arm. "I'm reading for school. Want to read with me?" And that's how we started reading together every late afternoon. First it was Dr. Seuss, then some Roald Dahl. I read slowly, pausing. He asked questions, took notes on words. I started teaching him to use the ruler, the square, to take measurements. "If you want, when you grow up, I'll teach you to build houses." He smiled with all his teeth. Sarah saw this and said, "Dad, you are teaching more now than when we were little." I stayed quiet, because maybe she was right. Because now I was more whole. Because now I wasn't trying to prove anything. Just live. The walls were finished. The garden gained color. Betty's chair started creaking again. And me, who thought I'd been thrown away, was learning to be useful again. Not for the outside world, but for myself. The routine here at home had become something else. It was like gradually, the dust from everything that happened to me was settling. And I was starting to see better where I was stepping. Tommy now knocked on the gate almost every day, sometimes not even to paint or help with something, but just to be there. He'd bring a school notebook, sit on the low wall, and show me his homework. And I'd teach him like I knew how, with patience, with stories, with comparisons to the construction world. One day, he asked me, "Mr. Chester, why do you live alone?" I thought about lying, saying it was my choice, but I couldn't. I just answered, "Because some people choose to leave even when you left the door open." He didn't say anything, but he stayed. Sometimes that's what we need. Someone who just stays. There was one afternoon when I was messing with the tools and he found an old bubble level I'd kept out of stubbornness. "What's this for?" he asked. So I grabbed a board, leaned it against the wall, put the level on top, and showed him. "See this little bubble here in the middle? If it stays right in the center, it means everything's balanced." He stared at it intently, and when it's not, I answered, "Then people have to adjust." And in that moment, it wasn't just the wood I was explaining, it was life. I started teaching more things. How to use a tape measure, how to measure angles, how to understand the weight of a hammer before lifting it. He learned fast. And I discovered that teaching was almost like leaving part of yourself there, a piece of who you were surviving in another person. But it wasn't just that moving inside me. The envelope, that old, thick envelope hidden in the back of the wardrobe, started visiting me in thoughts. Sometimes I'd be sweeping the porch and it would pop into my head. Other times it was in the early morning when sleep wouldn't come. I knew that wouldn't last forever. The paper, the secret, the weight. One Sunday morning, Sarah came alone. She sat with me in the living room, had coffee, and looked at me in silence. After a while she said, "Dad, if you want to tell me what happened there with Michael, I'm here, but only if you want to." I took a deep breath, looked at her, and said, "Honey, what happened was that he got tired of me, that's all." And I let him. She squeezed my hand. "You weren't a burden. Dad, you were a bridge. He just didn't know how to cross." That kept hammering in my head, bridge. I'd spent my life being that, connecting things, people, projects. I was never one to show off. I was one to support. But those who support also need a lap to rest in sometimes. That same week something happened I didn't expect. Tommy showed up different, quieter, eyes sunken, dirty clothes. I asked if everything was okay. He said yes, but it wasn't. With kids, you can sense it. The next day, he didn't come. The third day, neither. I got worried. Went to his house. It was on a dirt road. A run-down house with unpainted brick walls. His mom was sitting by the door with the face of someone who'd cried and dried up. He's in there, but he's not well. I went in. He was lying down with a fever. His mom said she couldn't get an appointment at the health clinic yet, that they were waiting. I lost my footing. I went back home, made tea, got medicine, brought it back, and stayed with him there. The fever gradually went down. I spent the whole night sitting in a plastic chair, watching him sleep and thinking. How can a child teach me so much in so little time? When he got better, he came to thank me. He said quietly, "You're my grandpa too." That broke me down and built me back up, because I knew what it was like to hear that and what it was like to go through life without hearing it. After that, I went days without touching the envelope, but it was there calling me, not for me, but because of what it could be. I started thinking differently. What I'd saved with so much fear maybe now had a purpose, a destiny, a mission. I called Sarah to talk. We sat on the porch as always. I waited for the sun to go down. "Honey, remember when you asked if I wanted to tell you what happened?" She nodded. "Well, I don't want to talk about Michael, but I want to tell you something else." I went in, got the envelope, put it in her hands. She looked without understanding, opened it slowly. When she saw the bills, she went pale. "Dad, what is this?" And I said, "It's what I saved my whole life working, asking nothing from nobody, without telling nobody. It was for you guys. But now maybe it's for another reason." She cried, not because of the bills, but because of the gesture. She hugged me tight. "Dad, why did you keep this alone?" I said, "Because nobody asked me if I still had something to give." But I did. We started thinking about what to do. I talked about Tommy, talked about his house, his mom, what he represented. Sarah agreed. "Let's make this a seed, Dad, but the right way." That night I slept with a light heart for the first time in years. I wasn't hiding anything. I was offering. That night, after I gave the envelope to Sarah, was different from all the others. I didn't sleep from exhaustion. I slept from relief. The pillow seemed less hard, and even the refrigerator noise sounded like music to me. For years I'd kept that money like someone keeps a wound. Protected, hidden, forgotten, but throbbing. And now that it had a name, face, and destiny, everything inside me started to settle. The next day Sarah came back early. She had papers, pens, and that look that determined women have. We sat at the kitchen table and she said, "Dad, we need to do this right. Legal, safe, so there's no confusion later." I agreed. I was never good with paperwork, but I always knew how to recognize when someone was right, and she was. What we were going to do couldn't be impulse. It had to be a plan. It had to last. We started with Tommy. I went to his house, called his mom to talk. We sat on the sidewalk under the shade of a tree that had more ants than leaves. I explained everything calmly. Said it wasn't charity, wasn't a favor, wasn't a debt. It was a decision. Part of the money I'd saved was going to be used to change their lives. His mom went mute, then cried, then said, "Mr. Chester, we don't have a way to thank you." And I said, "You don't need to thank me. Just don't waste it." We sorted out the paperwork with help from a lawyer friend of Sarah's. We opened an account in Tommy's mom's name, put in an amount that would be enough to fix the house, get running water, pay for a good school for him, guarantee food on the table. But with one condition: Tommy had to keep studying, and I was going to follow everything. When construction started, it seemed like a dream. Trucks arrived with sand, cement, wood. The neighbors asked, "What's happening here?" And Tommy's mom answered with pride, "I'm rebuilding what life had let fall down." The house started taking shape. New stucco, solid roof, real windows, a decent bathroom, a room for Tommy to study. And there I was, standing with a clipboard in my hand, giving suggestions, helping, smiling. It wasn't just wall construction. It was soul construction, The boy who used to spend his days on the street now had a place to dream. Gradually, other things changed. The people on the street started looking at me differently. Some stopped at the gate to ask if I needed help. Others just waved with respect. The rocking chair became a conversation point. One day a young man stopped and said, "You're the one helping that family over there, right?" I wanted to say congratulations. This changes everything round here. I thanked him and thought, maybe not everything is lost. Sarah followed closely. And more our relationship strengthened. We started having lunch together on Sundays. She brought the grandkids who were no longer ashamed to hug me. The table had laughter again. I had a name again. Grandpa. Tell that story about the truck that got stuck. Grandpa. Teach me to use the hammer. These were voices that hadn't looked for me before, now calling me with truth. One day I sat with Tommy on the sidewalk after school. He had a book in his hand and attentive eyes. He said he wanted to be an engineer to build houses like me. I smiled. Better than me. Right. Because I never went to college, only learned hands-on. He answered. But you learned with your soul. That broke me down, because that was it. I didn't have a diploma, but I had experience, and now I was passing it forward. I started thinking about doing more. I looked at the other kids on the street, at the families living in makeshift situations. I couldn't change the whole world, but I could plant more good things. I called Sarah again. Honey, what if we created something bigger? A fund, a small association to help those who need it. But with follow-up, education, health, foundation. She looked at me with full eyes. Dad, you want to leave a legacy? And I answered, I don't want to leave one. I want to start one while I'm still here, in the following months. We created a project named after Betty, the Betty Foundation. Building dignity, registered, legalized, with help from people who believed. We used another part of the money, kept it secret from almost everyone. It was our thing, quiet but firm, like the faith she had in simple things. Over time, I started receiving letters, children thanking us for school supplies. Mothers saying they could finally take their child to the dentist. A father moved because he could now work and leave his daughter in real tutoring. And all this because an old construction worker had the courage to do things differently. But not everything was easy. Some people were suspicious. A neighbor said, that old man's hiding something. Nobody helps like that for free. Some spread rumors that I'd won the lottery. But I didn't care, because I knew the truth. And because now I wasn't alone anymore, until one day the phone rang. It was Michael. The phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch working on a piece of wood I wanted to turn into a bench. The sun was beating down hard on the yard, and the oak tree was already starting to drop its end-of-season leaves. And I heard the ring. I thought it was Sarah, or someone from the foundation. The name on the sign drew a sigh from him. The Betty Foundation. Building dignity. He stood there staring. Mom would have loved this, I answered. She's here in all of this inside. Some children were drawing, others reading. Sarah was organizing files. Tommy was tutoring to younger girls. Michael walked around the place like someone stepping carefully, observing everything. He picked up a drawing from the wall. It was a portrait of Betty made with colored pencils and a phrase underneath. Who plants love harvests a full house. He got emotional. Dad, how did you do all this? And I said, with time, with silence, and with what was left of me. He sat down, asked to hear more, and I told him from the beginning, about the letters, about the empty nights, about the day I found the note in the pot. I didn't talk about the money yet because it wasn't time. It was a day to talk about history, motivation, learning. That night he slept at Sarah's house. The next day he came back early, helped in the yard, read with Tommy, and stayed until after lunch. After everyone left, he stayed. We sat in the kitchen. He seemed restless. "Dad, I've been different since I came here, and I wanted to ask you something." I waited. "I'd like to be part of this too, not as a way to repair what I did, but because I really want to, because I believe I held back emotion. Are you ready to listen without being in control, to serve without reward, to not be the center of anything?" He answered, "I'm ready to really start." I nodded. "Then start by coming every Saturday to listen more and talk less." He laughed. "Deal." Before leaving, he stood near Betty's wardrobe, looked at it thoughtfully. "Dad, this wardrobe reminds me of her. It always seemed to hold more than just clothes." And I said, almost without thinking, "You have no idea." He turned to me. "What do you mean?" I shook my head. "Someday, Michael, when you understand that the value of things isn't in what they hide, but in what they transform." He didn't insist, and I knew it still wasn't time, but it was close. That night I wrote another phrase in my notebook. When forgiveness opens the door, love starts tidying the house. It was late afternoon. Light coming through the window cracks, like the house itself was breathing relief. It had been weeks since Michael came every Saturday, helping at the foundation, sitting with me on the porch, listening to the children's stories. Talking with Tommy, Tyler already called me Grandpa, without anyone having to ask. Sarah said the family was different, and deep down I knew the difference wasn't just in them. It was in me too. The wound still existed. Didn't heal easily, but the medicine came. It came with time, with gestures, with respected silence, and with long hugs. Michael now looked me in the eyes, and more than that, he saw me. It was on one of those Saturday afternoons that I decided, not on impulse, but with certainty. I called them both, Sarah and Michael. I waited for the coffee to brew, sipped it calmly. Corn cake like Betty liked. They sat down, looked at me, with that expression only children make when they sense their father is about to say something serious. "I want to tell you something. Something I've kept for many years, more than 20. Michael frowned. Sarah fell silent with her cup near her, mouth without drinking. "Remember your mother's wardrobe?" Michael. He nodded. "Well, behind that thin wood at the bottom, there's a false space. Inside there's an envelope. Always has been. With money. A lot of money." They looked at each other, surprised. "How much?" "Dad," Sarah asked. "More than $3 million. The silence was absolute. Not even the wind dared to interrupt. "I saved this over my lifetime. Part came from work I did out of the country. Part I put together with side jobs, with effort, with faith. I never told anyone, not even your mother. I wanted this to someday be something for you guys." Michael broke the silence. "Dad, why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because I wanted that when you found out, it wouldn't be the money guiding the relationship between us. I needed to know who you were without this in the middle, and today I know." Sarah cried silently. Michael looked at me like someone seeing a new world. "And why tell us now?" he asked. I answered, "Because now I see already. Because now I'm not afraid anymore of what this money will do to you." I went to the wardrobe, opened it carefully, pulled the back part, got the envelope, brought it to the table. They looked at it like it was a piece of miracle. Part has already been used for the foundation, for Tommy's life, and will continue being used, but the rest is yours, with one condition: that you never stop looking at others with the same compassion you now look at me." Michael cried for the first time. Really cried. "Dad, I don't deserve this." I touched his shoulder. "Maybe you didn't deserve it before, but now you're trying, and trying is already the first step for someone who wants to change." We divided the money legally, organized. With help from a trusted accountant of Sarah's, part was designated for the foundation. Part was saved for the grandchildren in controlled savings accounts. Another part stayed with me, not for luxury, but to live with dignity, with choice, with freedom. Over time, the story started circulating, but without fanfare. Without headlines, the old construction worker who helped families, who set up a foundation with his wife's name, who taught children to use rulers and hammers. Some came to ask, "Why did you do all this in secret?" And I'd say, because good things don't need a stage. They need purpose. Michael became a permanent volunteer at the foundation, left some of his office life behind, and started really listening to people. Sarah became the project coordinator. Tommy, now 15, taught tutoring classes, helped with bookkeeping, and said he was definitely going to study engineering. And me, well, I continued being the old man in the rocking chair, but now surrounded, listened to, respected. When I walked down the street, someone would wave. When a child got a math problem wrong, they'd come ask for help. When the gate squeaked, it was a sign that life was coming in. The other day, I sat with Michael in the backyard. He looked at me and said, "You know, Dad, I thought I knew you, but now I see I was just on the surface." I smiled, and you only now looked at me with the eyes of a son. I kept thinking about everything: the pain, the abandonment, the silence, the hidden money, the denied hug, and also the reunion, the forgiveness, the reconstruction, the love that doesn't shout but remains. And that's why I tell you, it's never too late to start over. Never too late to ask forgiveness, and never too late to be who we were born to be. Now tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done? And drop a comment letting me know, where are you listening from? What corner of America is hearing this conversation? Because sometimes life teaches us that the greatest wealth isn't what we accumulate, but what we choose to share. And the most important inheritance isn't money. It's the example we leave behind. Remember to like this video if Chester's story touched your heart. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. And share this with someone who needs to hear that. It's never too late for a second chance. What part of Chester's journey resonated most with you? Tell me in the comments below.